did before. So be fluent with your React skills. So always be fluent, practice a lot, then go to any interview. Okay. So now let's get started by developing this. Let's develop it slowly, handling handling cases, right? One by one. So this is a code sandbox of React. So you can just open it on your laptop. Codesandbox.io is the website. Just go start a new React project, and it will give you the similar kind of a view. Let's build it now. Okay. So for the heading, I am just removing this h2 over here, and let me give it a heading. Maybe let's call this as validate OTP. Validate OTP. Okay. So now, and then over here, I'll develop the component or something like that, right? First, most important thing, the major mistake that a lot of students do in this interview question is they try to, now suppose if it is a 4 digit OTP or a 5 digit OTP, most of the students assume it is a 4 digit or 5 digit or 6 digit OTP. Never assume anything. You always have to ask your interviewer, right? So suppose if you ask your interviewer that, okay, what number of digits would be there in your OTP? So the interviewer can say, okay, we have 4 digits or 5 digits or 6 digits or whatsoever. But a good senior engineer will make a generic component. You have to make a generic component. What does it mean? That means our component is built in such a way that it is not dependent on number of input OTP characters. Okay. So suppose if today the OTP is of 4 digits and tomorrow the website wants to change it to 5 digits, so your component should be comfortable with that, right? So you have to make a generic component. And I would say it's a scalable, reusable component that you give the number of digits in an OTP and it will render accordingly. Okay. So let's make it like that. Most important thing, because if you hard code 3 digits or 4 digits or 5 digit or 6 digit, then your component is not scalable or distributable, right? So always make it generic. So let's now say I am developing a constant that you can keep, and let's say number of digits. Okay, you can say number of digits or OTP count or OTP digits count. You can name it whatever you want to. Digits count, I can just say like this, right? You can have a better name for it. Constant OTP digits count, and let's say 5 is the count right now. Okay, I'm not taking 4 or 6 or 5, and your component should be such that if I change this number to 4, it still works. If I change it to 6, it still works. Okay. So you have to make it in such a way. Now, to enter OTP, if you will see, when you have these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So you have, these are input boxes. These are separate input boxes. Okay. A shared CN does not even allow you to jump to another, the next input box unless you fill this. Ideally, we will allow this to the student, to the user, because why not, right? Because it should be allowed. I can just go and type the third digit before, right? So I don't have to make exactly like this. I can have my own customizations to it. You can ask your interviewer for any customization if they need it. And if you are assuming anything, just let the interviewer know. So let's build it. First of all, what I'll do is I will create 4 input boxes, basically 4 input boxes or 5 input boxes, right? OTP digits count, 5 input boxes to render, right? Basically, let me just build it and show it to you to have those input, right? So this is input text, right? Similarly, I will need 4 of such, right? So I will need 5 of such, sorry. 5 of such, right? So these are 5 input boxes for 5 digits. Okay, but this is not a good way of doing it. First of all, let's also create a state variable where we will store these 5 digits. Okay, so where we will store, so let's say I would call this as OTP input, or I would say input array, right? That's a better name. So input array. This array will contain digits in this format. Suppose the OTP is 1234, so the array will be something like this. Okay, the array will be 1234, and each of these digits will represent each input box. So this is my thought process. You know, in my tutorial, whenever I teach, I try to explain and express all the thoughts which are coming to my head. So I am trying to speak whatever is coming to my head and try to absorb that, try to focus and listen to what I am saying, because that will help you develop that mindset, because that mindset is very important when you go in an interview. Okay, so what I am thinking is, for each digit, for each input box, I will bind this input array somehow, right? So I'll show you how we can do that. So I am using a state variable, use state, and let's call this array as empty for now, right? And this can be our input array, right? And I can also have a set input ARR, right? Set input ARR for setting the value of input. So by default, it's empty right now, but ideally let us fill with empty spaces, right? It should have 4, right? It should have 4 or 5 digits. So how will I do that? I will fill it with new array, right? New array. I can create a new array, and how many elements should be there in that array? That should be OTP digits count. Okay, so this is my OTP digits count, and I can say dot fill. So if I fill this array and I can fill it with a number, suppose 1, so all my digits can become 1 now. So the array would be 1 1 1 1, or I can fill it with 0000 or empty, right? So ideally we will keep it empty, but for now this is our input array. Instead of doing rendering this input box again and again, I can loop through this input array and build this input, right? So instead of writing it 5 times again and again, I can use a map function over here. People who are fluent with React would obviously know what I am doing right now. People who are not good in React, who are the beginners, you can find this a little intimidating. I would suggest you to go and watch my map filter reduce video, because that will be very important to understand how map works, filter works, reduce works, because these are the things that you should definitely be good at if you are a front end engineer. Okay, so now I am input map, and now what I'll do, I will map through this array and I will render these input boxes. Okay, so I can just grab it and I can just return some piece of JSX. This is the input box, right? So I can return this piece of JSX, and I can say map, and inside the map here I can say input, and this can be index, right? So the first value is this input, each input, and then the second is index. Now over here, whenever you map all always remember you have to add a key. If you will forget this, interviewer will definitely deduct your marks. Okay. So you should always remember there should be a key whenever you are mapping onto an array. Got it? So now we have got 5 input boxes again. Now, what we can do is let us also quickly add some CSS. For that, let me add a class and let's call this as OTP input, right? Input. And let's add some CSS over here because why not, right? Let's add some CSS to make it look a little better. OTP input. Now what I'll do is let's first of all make it something like this, right? So basically these are looking ugly. So how do I make it? Let's give it some, maybe first of all, let's give it height and CSS over here because why not, right? Let's add some CSS to make it look a little better. OTP input. Now what I'll do is let's first of all make it something like this, right? So basically these are looking ugly. So how do I make it? Let's give it some, maybe first of all, let's give it height and width. Height of maybe let's say 20 px. How does it look? And width of 20 px. Let's see how it looks. Cool. It looks very small, right? So let me make it maybe 50 px and 50 px. How does it look now? Cool. This looks much better, isn't it? Now, see, let us also increase the font size because see, font is very small over here, right? See this. Font is very small. So let's increase the font size also. And let's make it font size as 40 px because the size of input box is 50 px. So 40 px is fine. And let me give it padding, or maybe let me give it text align center because I want all these numbers to appear in center. Cool. This looks better, isn't it? This looks better, isn't it? Okay, now we'll fix this. See, because these are input box, I can enter multiple numbers over here. But ideally, this should not happen, right? So we'll fix this, don't worry. So this looks good. Let's also add a little bit of margin, right? Margin of 5 px maybe. Cool. This looks much better now, right? So let's go back to our UI. Now what we'll do is, the first problem with our validation OTP is if I write 1 and if I write if suppose I wrote 1, so my input box should take me to second input box, isn't it? Just like this, right? So over here, if I type 1, so it takes me to the next input box automatically, right? And if I refresh the page, my first input box should be automatically, see, ShatCN does not have it, but ideally what should happen, if I refresh my page, it should automatically focus my first input box. Ideally we can make this cool features, right? So as soon as I refresh, my first input box should be focus, right? Suppose my first input box should be focus. How can I make something like this, right? So you can build all these features. Slowly we will build all of it. Don't worry about it. And we will also build, suppose if I write 1 over here, it should move to the next input box, right? So we'll build all of it. But first of all, we'll handle one case. Suppose somebody tries to enter A, B, C, D. This should not be allowed, right? This is the most important thing that should be not allowed. A, B, C, D. I don't want to handle this, right? Cool. So let's slowly start building things up. First of all, let's bind this input to the value, right? Let's bind this input box to the value. Now value of this input box will come from this input array, right? Input array of index, right? So basically input array of index. Cool. So see this. Now my input array is bind to this, the value, this input is bind to my input array index. Why 1111 came in? Because I have filled this input array with 1, right? So you can fill it with empty initially instead of 1. Cool. So now our input box is empty and it is tied to this input array. Now what we'll do is on change. Suppose if you are typing in something, right? So typing in something, so it will give me an event. So let me write a handle on change, right? Handle on change function. And in this function, I will pass my e.target.value, right? So e.target.value is basically whatever you are typing in. Suppose if I'm typing in A over here, right? So handle on change is not defined, right? So let's define it. But if I type in A over here, so whatever you are typing in will go inside this handle on change. Okay. So let's write handle on change. So const handle on change. Okay. Handle on change is a function. Let me also close this, right? So let me close this for better visibility. Okay. So now you can see it better, I guess, right? So handle on change over here, I will accept the value. That is the input value, whatever the user is typing. Okay. And over here, cool. And let me log that value. Okay. So let's log this value and let me show it to you what it comes, right? So over here, if I go over here, this is my console and we are seeing a lot of errors. We'll fix all these errors. Always make sure your console is clear and it should not have any errors whenever you are doing in an interview, because interviewers will grill you, right? If you have errors in your console, always make sure. Okay. So right now we don't have any errors. So suppose if I type in something, if I type in A, so do you see console log is A? Let me make it a little bigger. Can I? No, it's not getting a little bigger, but just see, it's A written over here, right? So A is written over here. So I don't want to allow any alphabet it's over here, right? So what we'll do is, uh, so if my input, before even doing this, first of all, whatever I am typing in, see, now my input boxes are not working. Why? Because I have not handled on change over here, right? Handle on change. So now what I'll do is I will set my input ARR with the new value, whatever the user is typing in, right? So how will I enter it? So first of all, right, is I will set my input ARR. My input boxes are not working. Why? Because I have not handled on change over here, right? Handle on change. So now what I'll do is I will set my input ARR with the new value, whatever the user is typing in, right? So how will I enter it? So first of all, I'll have to basically update my input array with whatever I am typing in over here. Suppose if I type in 1 over here, so my input array of 0 should have 1, right? My input array of 0 should have 1. So how would I do that? First of all, for that, see, I can't directly modify. See, I cannot directly modify like this. This will be bad to do that, right? So you cannot do this in a React interview, right? And I will also pass an index from here, right? Because I want to update that particular index. Suppose if that character is of first input box, second input box, third input box. So accordingly, we'll have to update my array, right? So basically this input array is something like this, right? So let me just give you clearly. Right now it is empty, right? With all the empty spaces, right? So suppose if somebody is typing in the first input box 1, so it should come over here in this input array. And I cannot do something like this over here. I cannot do index is equals to value, right? I cannot do this. So how would I update this array is I'll create a new array, right? New array, and this new array will exactly be the copy of this input array, right? This new array will exactly be the copy. How do you copy an array? So you can use a spread operator. If people who don't know what is spread operator, read about it. You should be good in JavaScript. So this way I can create a copy of this array. Once I have created a copy of this array, I will update the first element of this array, right? So what I'll do is new array of my index is equals to my new value. Whatever I am typing in over here, this is the new value. And I will update my input array with my new array. So always make sure you are doing it with a new array. Otherwise, because see, array is passed by reference, right? And it will create a mess, and your solution will not work if you are not creating a new array and updating over here. right? So these are the small mistakes that a lot of students do in interview, and then they keep on debugging, and things don't work, right? Now my input box will start working. Suppose if I enter 1, right? Oh my god, index is not defined. Why? Okay, because I'm not getting index over here. Cool, now it should work, right? So if I write 1, so 1 is over here, and in the console also I've seen 1. But suppose in my input box, if I enter A, this A is also accepted. I don't want to allow this A. So what I'll do is, suppose if somebody is typing in any character A, B, C, D or something, I want to ignore everything. How would I do that? Very, very simple. Very, very simple. How? As soon as the value of input box changes, right? As soon as the value of input box changes, I'll check if my value is not a number, right? So there's a function in JavaScript is nan, right? Is nan. So if my value is not a number, so just ignore, right? So don't do anything. If my value is not a number, don't do anything. So if I write this will handle our case. Now you see, if I write any A, B, C, D, E, F, G, nothing works. Only the numbers will work over here. But oh my god, there are 3, 4 numbers. If I write 1, 2, 3, 4, everything is coming into the same input box. I want to only allow one number over here, right? One number, and that should be the last number, right? That should be the last number. Suppose if I'm typing in 1 over here, if I type in 4 over here, so 1 should go away and only 4 should remain, because this is the behavior that you want. Okay, so this is an important thing. How would you do this? Now again, a lot of students can pull their hairs when they want to solve this, but there is a very simple mathematics. You just do a substring or do a splice or do a slice or whatsoever to handle strings, right? So it's up to you how you want to handle it. What I would do is, before updating the value over here, what I can do is, a very simple way of doing this is, I can do a splice and I can do -1. That means I will only get the last character of that input, right? So let's save and see if it works. See, I'm just having my fingers crossed because I am confused between splice and splice a lot. Slice and splice a lot. I think it should be slice. If I'm not wrong, it should be slice, not splice. But let's see if it works, right? So 1, okay. Splice is not a function. I understood. It should be slice. It should be slice. Okay, so these are JavaScript input boxes, and just try it out. It will make sense. 1, yes. So if I write 4 now, see this. If I write 5 now, it is only taking the last input, right? If I write 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever I write, only the last input. This is what the behavior we want. I don't want multiple entries in a single input box. We have handled this case. Good. Now what we want is, suppose if we have filled this value and the value is entered over here, now I want to focus on the next input box. Okay, I want to move my cursor to the next input box. Making this is tricky, my dear friends. Making this is very, very tricky. How? You will have to find out the input box. First of all, you will have to find out the reference of that input box and then try to focus it. Then call a focus function on top of it. Right? So, how would I do that? First of all, I would need to add ref. So React gives you a way to add references in your JSX. Okay. So I will use a use ref hook for that, right? So I'll create a ref array, right? So I'll create a ref array and I'll use a use ref. So now people who don't know about use ref, please read about it. And let me tell you, my dear friends, if you are not good in React, if you want to dive deep into every small damn thing about React, why not go check out Namaste React course on our namastedev.com website. So over there, I have taught in Namaste React in detail, in deep, in depth about all these React concepts, all these React hooks, how use state works, how map works, how filter, reduce, use ref, and a lot of other things works. Basically, I've dived deep into the internals of React, right? How this React code is rendered and all those other stuff. So please go check out Namaste React if you haven't already. And definitely, even if you are a seasoned senior React developer, still you will have a lot to learn from that Namaste React course. Trust me, even the most senior developers learn from that course because I have explained it in a beautiful way. React, Redux. I have also explained you a lot of other things, right? Routing and everything is covered in that course. Okay. So enough of the promotion now. Let's get back to work. So you can use a use ref. Now this ref array will store the reference to this input boxes. How do you store it? Now listen to me very carefully and see what I am doing. I am creating a reference. How do you create a reference? Over here, ideally you pass a ref array, right? So if you pass a ref array over here, this will not work because I want each input box to connect to this reference array, and over here let me make it an array, right? So this is an array, so each input box should be one reference array, right? Reference array. So what I'll do is I'll just add, so suppose this is an input, I want to tie this input to my reference array dot current, right? Current. Over here I will put a see, reference array dot current is an array, right? I want to give an index and I want to map all these index to my input, right? For each input. This is how you will map it. Why it's not working? Let us just see. It should ideally work fine. Input reference array use ref is not defined. Okay, I think I have forgot importing it. Uh, it should have auto imported, but not sure what happened. Cool. Now use ref is defined. Let me refresh the page. All errors should go away in the console. Make sure, whenever you are solving in an interview, make sure that your console is good, right? Console is clear always, right? And I'm speaking a lot. That's why it is taking me a lot of time. But in your interview, you have to do it very, very fast. Let me do it very, very fast now. So I have got the reference now over here. Now what I'll have to do is, suppose if let me close the console. Suppose if you refresh the page, my first input should be focused automatically. How would I do that? How would I do that? Let me show it to you very easily. You will have to use a use effect for that. Suppose when your component is rendered, as soon as the component is rendered, I want to focus my first ref array. First ref array, right? First reference. Okay. How do I do that? Use effect. Use effect. Again, all the Namaste React student would be knowing when the use effect will be called and what is the meaning of this empty array. So this is a dependency array. If you keep it empty, your component will be rendered once and this use effect callback function will be called as soon as your component is rendered. Cool. So now in your use effect, what I'll do is I'll just ref array dot current and of the index 0. I want to focus on the first one and I will just do focus. That's it. Cool. And let me also write a question exclamation mark. Suppose if your current of 0 reference is not present, it will not throw any error, right? So that's why I have written this. And this is known as optional chaining. For people who don't know about optional chaining, read about this question mark dot syntax. It's very, very important. Use effect is not defined because I have not imported it. Why it's not auto importing today? Ideally, it should auto import. Cool. Now use effect is imported from React. Cool. So now see this. Do you see this? If I refresh my page, my cursor would automatically go to the first input box. Amazing. thing, isn't it? Now if I type 1, it should take me to the next input box. So now you understood, right? How do we move it to next input box? How do we move it to next input box? You understood, isn't it? So what we'll do is I'll just have to copy this statement and I'll have to keep moving ahead. So suppose as soon as my value is changed over here, as soon as I have typed something over here, right? And it is not a number, it will go over here. I have set the input box. Now what I will do is I will just do a ref current of the particular index, right? So what I'll do is, so suppose of the particular index, right? So what I'll do is, so suppose if I am right, I'll do is I will do index plus 1, right? And don't forget to put this optional chaining, otherwise it will fail, right? So make sure you are putting this optional chaining, right? So now let us just refresh the page and let me show you the behavior. It will be an amazing behavior. If I write 1, if I write 2, see this, it's automatically moving ahead. 3, if I write 4, if I write 5, it is automatically moving. Everything works seamlessly, my dear friends. Isn't it amazing? Amazing, right? Now, one thing what we have to do is, suppose if I want to change my input, right? So suppose if I am hitting backspace. So if I am hitting backspace on 5. So if I hit backspace, so the 5 is clear. Now if I hit backspace, nothing happens. Nothing happens. Why? Because when I type in backspace, it should take me to the previous input box. It should focus the previous input box. Okay. So let's do this. So how do you handle this? So there is a function. I'll have to track if I am pressing backspace or not, right? How do I track that? For that, I'll have to listen to on key up or on key down, right? So there are two events that is given to you by browsers, on key up, on key down. And you can take these events and you can do handle on. I'll have to listen to take me to the previous input box. And backspace on 5. So if I hit backspace, so the 5 is clear. Now if I hit backspace, nothing happens. Nothing happens. Why? Because when I type in backspace, it should take me to the previous input box. It should focus the previous input box. Okay. So let's do this. So how do you handle this? So there is a function. I'll have to track if I am pressing backspace or not, right? How do I track that? For that, I'll have to listen to on key up or on key down, right? So there are two events that is given to you by browsers, on key up, on key down. And you can take these events and you can do handle on key up or on key down, handle on key down, right? Handle on key down, and you can pass this event over there, and you can also pass in a index, right? Because index is important. It will tell us where we need to go. So handle on change. Let's write one more constant because index is important. It will tell us where we need to go. So handle on change. Let's write one more constant handle on key down, right? So as and on key down is pressed as soon as your key presses, that is when this function is called. Okay. So you should know when this function is being called, right? So handle on key down. Now on key down, E and index over here. So what I'll have to do is I'll have to first of all check whether this event is backspace or not, right? Whether the event is backspace or not. How can you check that? Let me just show it to you. First of all, as soon as the key press happens, I want to console log my event. Let me just show you what you get in this event, right? So if I type in something, suppose if I type in 1, so it is giving me a on key down event. Now suppose if I'm typing in backspace, so it is again giving me a on key down event. Now let me just show you over here you find a key, and over here do you see a backspace written over here? So this This is what we have to use. So suppose if my key is backspace, right? So if my e dot key is equal to my backspace, right? If my e dot key is equal to backspace, that means I am pressing backspace over here, right? So if condition, if my key is backspace, then what should I do? I should focus on my previous input. How would I do that? I would focus on my index minus 1. So simple. Isn't it? Very, very simple. isn't it? Very, very simple. But this will also have an issue, right? It will have an issue. I'll just tell you what the issue would be, I guess. So if I'm writing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now if I hit backspace, see, it is it is behaving very randomly, isn't it? It is behaving very randomly. It automatically deleted my some variable, and then it took me to it did not do anything. See, if I am doing backspace, it's not behaving how I want it to be, right? So suppose, see, if I'm writing everything, if I'm typing backspace, it is clearing the previous input and it is taking me back to the next input. Why? It's behaving very weirdly, isn't it? So first of all, you know, let me just tell you why it's happening. If I am writing 1 over here, right? Suppose if I am writing 1 over here, so what should happen is, right now the value is empty over here, right? Right now the value is empty. If I type backspace, it is taking me back to my previous value, because let me just tell you why it's taking. So what's happening with this bug is, see, 1, it is taking me to next input box. That's completely fine. If I am doing a, let me just tell you, if I am doing a space over here, it is still taking me to next input box. If I am writing space over here, it is still taking me to next input box. If I am typing space, this is a bug in our program. Why it's happening? Because even if the value is not present over here, still it is taking me to next input box. So we have to restrict this next input box focus once only if the value is present, and right, then only I'll have to focus on the next input box. Box, right? So let me just refresh. So over here, if the value is present, then only I have to focus on next input box. So suppose if I enter space, it is still taking me because it's value. And I have to also trim this, right? I will also trim this value, because otherwise uh, constant new value is equals to, I don't want spaces also over here, right? So value dot trim, so that any extra spaces are trimmed, white spaces are trimmed. So, and I will use new value everywhere I am using value. So if the new value is there, so now if I am refreshing, if I am handling this, nothing is happening, right? Nothing is happening. But suppose if I write 1, so it takes me to next input box. Got it? So now if I am writing space, it should not take me. Now if I hit backspace, it is correct, right? It's correct now. Works. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if I do backspace, it is see, again it's not deleting 5, it's deleting the previous one. Because see, when I hit backspace, I am what I am doing is I am taking it to next input box, right? I am changing the current behavior. So if the value is not present, right? If the value is not present in that input box, then only, right? E dot target dot value. Because I know you might have not understood, but let me just first of all try it out, then I will explain you what was happening, right? So there can be a confusion to all of you. I understand that as a teacher. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I am hitting backspace, see, now it's working fine. If I hit one more backspace, it's working perfectly fine. Cool. So why that was happening is, see, if I write like this, listen, just look at this code, right? If I write like this, e dot key is equals to backspace. What's happening over here is, suppose if there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Suppose if I am hitting backspace over here, so the default behavior of backspace was to clear. But what I am doing is, I am focusing it on the previous input box, and then the backspace is actually happening. Right? So what I am doing is, if I am hitting backspace over here, so it is taking me, first of all, this focus is happening to the previous one, then the actual backspace is happening. Okay, so I don't have to do this. I only have to change this focus if my input is clear, right? If there is nothing if my input box over here contains something, then I don't want to move over here, right? I want to delete the present one. I want to delete the current one. I only want to move to previous one if this input box is empty. I am repeating once again, listen to me very carefully. If my input box is empty, then only I want to move to previous one. Otherwise, I do not. Right? So this is what I want to restrict. So I will only move over here if my e dot target dot value is not present. So either you can write like this, or you can add it on the if condition, right? Both of them will work, right? So let me just write it down over here. If my backspace is there, if e is backspace, right? So and over here, one as a third one, right? And it automatically 0 over here, and it replaces the digit. So it's perfectly valid. Now, I think that was all in this, in the interview question. The interviewer can grill you a lot and can ask you to implement more things inside this input box, right? They can ask you to make something like this. If you are doing left arrow, right arrow, it should move to different input boxes. They can also ask you to do a lot more customizations. So modify your code accordingly. But this, if the interviewer is not grilling you, if you make like this, you will definitely pass that interview. Okay. And I would like to correct myself a little bit more. If you are building this in the initially, I said you should not take more than 20 minutes. You can take 20 to 30 minutes, because I think roughly even I have taken 30 minutes to implement this. uh, uh, and let me also to come here as a student and refactoring. I want to keep my tutorial videos very natural. So that's why I don't prepare this beforehand. I just come over here and try to solve it just like I would have done an interview. Very important. Liking this series video. All the best for your interviews, and wish you the best, and wish you the best in your career. I prepare this question. That's very, very important. Bye bye. See you in the next video very soon.